Hey everyone, it's Will, the host of the Everyman Drummer podcast, the one that you can listen to on Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, Apple Podcasts, all of those other podcast places. But here's the best part. You're probably wondering, how am I getting it distributed? Well, I'm here to tell you that, and you have to check it out. Anchor.fm, or even downloading the Anchor app on Android and Apple iOS systems right there. It's so easy that anybody can use it to start their own podcast. Hell, even me, a drummer, can use it to start their own podcast. And the best thing, check this out, the best thing about using this app, you guessed it, it's free. And they also help you distribute your podcast against all the other platforms that are being used today for everybody to get their podcast listened to out there. So I encourage you guys, check it out. If you really want to get a podcast started, use Anchor.fm. It's the only one that I use. I know there's other hosting sites out there, but this one is absolutely 100% free. You just need your email address, and you got to have a cool voice to use it. Maybe, but who knows? But you all get the point of it. It's really easy to get it started, and check it out on Anchor.fm. Hello, and everyone, and welcome to the Everyman Drummer podcast. I'm your host, Will, and today we're going to take a little different approach on the on drummers that influence us as regular guys if we're listening to different music. The other night, I'll bring this up forward. We all have influences of different drummers. I alluded to the other day. I have five. I have what I call the big five, and it's not. It's narrowed down to big five because if we were to do an influence on every drummer that influenced, the list would be on, and would just be, it would just be ridiculous to hear. But for me, I have it down to the big five, and that's Peart, Portnoy, Phillips, Weckl, and Porcaro. Those are my big five. But outside of that realm, I have other drummers that I listen to, and the one drummer that I want to talk to you about today is Will Kennedy of the Yellow Jackets. He's one of my favorite drummers just to listen to off to the side, just technique, style-wise, the way he plays, the way he, approaches the instrument with the band. Little information on that. I was introduced to the Yellow Jackets back in 1995, 96, somewhere around that. The first CD that I picked up of them was their release called The Spin. Mark Russo was on that one. He was their original saxophone player. And that was the first time that I've actually heard of Will Kennedy. And at that point in his career there, he was playing Sonar drums and Paiste Cymbals along with Evans heads. Right now, from what I can see now, in his latest endorsement, so he switched to Zildjian cymbals, and he's now playing Pearl drums, and I believe he's using Remo Drumheads on the latest stuff that he's recording with the Yellow Jackets. But I want to touch base on him because the other night I was watching Yellow Jackets concerts on YouTube. There was one from 2009, and then another one later on was from 2012 with Jaco Pastorius' son Felix playing the bass. And just watching Will Kennedy play the drums there, just his style, his fluidity, how he goes around the kit. I don't know if a lot of you've seen him play. He plays with he's got an open style style of playing, and it's your typical 4-piece drum set with one rack tom up high, and then he'll have a floor tom down below, bass drum and a snare drum, and then on his left side of the kit, so you got the hi-hat and the ride cymbal, and then on the right there's a crash where you would typically put a ride cymbal, and then another crash just off to the right side of that. And I was just watching him play there, and the Yellow Jackets being a contemporary jazz group, one of my favorite jazz groups that I listen to, a fair amount of time. I like to cover them when I'm doing drum covers, because just the drumming is just so smooth, and if you can nail that down, you're gonna be pretty good with that stuff. And just the way that Will plays, it's just to my ears, it's just beautiful. Just the way his ride work when he's playing the drums, and it's just the snap you hear on that snare drum. When he was playing the Sonar drums, you could really hear that heavy booming, the mahogany shells that are on the Sonar drums. It's something that's very apparent, and it will cut through any mix. And with him playing on the Yellow Jackets recordings, because this is where I only know him, and he's played with other artists such as Shaka Khan and Lee Ritenour. I've never heard any of the stuff that he played with Lee Ritenour, but I've only know him as the Yellow Jackets. And there was a time that he was not in the band that I didn't listen to him. No offense to the other drummers, but Peter Erskine is one of the top class jazz drummers of time, and I remember the first time I heard him, and I was just completely blown away. But to have Peter playing in with the Yellow Jackets in that style, it kind of mellowed out the music, so I kind of fell out of touch with them a little bit. But then they had another, I forgot who the other drummer that was in the band, that came in between right after Peter had left. But then Will came back, and it was just, I was like, all right, I'm brought back into it. Again, he's not one of my main influences, but he's one of my favorite drummers to listen to because, again, the way he approaches the instrument and complements the music that he's playing, it's just fantastic. And that's, again, I can't stress that enough with this guy, the way he plays. It's just, if you have a chance to check him out, even check out some of the Yellow Jackets stuff that they have on YouTube, it's just fantastic. I'm reading a little bit right now off of his bio on the website for the Pearl Drums bio, and he's striving to innovate, pioneer, and contribute positively to the course of our music industry. I have to agree with that, simply because Will does have a way of bringing in a different technique and style to the instrument, and it's something that I like seeing different drummers bring in. It's almost like you're writing and you're adding your own little kick to that piece of story that you're trying to tell. If you're trying to write a storybook or a big journal in a biography sense of way, and we're looking at it as we would in a drumming sense, Will is one of those guys that brings in such a different type of a key to it, and like his style, it's just, to me, it is just great. The way he commands himself on the kit, it is just fantastic, and he just influences. When I'm playing, I find myself that sometimes some of the little elements that he plays, I like to take a little bit of that and then use that in my playing. Especially his little ride patterns that he plays. He's got it's almost like a signature ride pattern that he plays. I like to call it his signature ride pattern because I've never heard anybody else play that before. And just when he's playing those little intricate ride patterns, it's just fantastic to just hear. And I like trying to pick out little nuances here from my favorite drummers. And again, each drummer will all put our own little stamps on things. Maybe we'll call it our own, maybe we won't, who knows. But like with him, it's that little ride pattern, and then the snap on the snare. You hear those ghost notes that he plays. The way he has his snare tuned, it's got such good top end, but it bottoms out really nice. It just cuts through the mix, and it complements the music very well. If you take a listen to the first track of the Yellow Jackets recording album that they have called Blue Hats. The first track, I believe it's Blue Hats, but I'm not sure. The first track on that CD, just listening to that snare drum, it is just fantastic. It's just something that you really want to have that going based off. It's such a tough groove to play, and I covered it on my YouTube page, playing it, and some of the comments I got on there were, it's a tough groove to play. It is and I'm not going to lie, it is a very tough groove to play. And he used it on another song prior to that called, I think it was The Red Sea. He used it on the album release called, I think the album was called Run for Your Life, and I think it's called The Red Sea. And that same groove that he used in that song, he used it on the first track for the Blue Hats album, and it opens up the track. That song really opens up the album, and that it sets the tone for the rest of that record. It's a great album to listen to. Just again, there's nothing bad that I can say about this guy. It's just, I want to touch on the way he plays such an the open way he plays with the left hand on the hi-hat and the left hand on the ride. And you really you listen to it and you just listen, trying to figure out what he's doing. It is tough. He is, again, he's pioneering a different style of drumming, and it helps to bring that type of stuff into the foreground, because he's one of those innovative drummers that you like to kind of like listen to and just be inspired to play the instrument like that. And with him, he does that for me. He does inspire me to play it a little bit and approach the drums in a completely different way, where you can look at it as the musical instrument that you're going to drive that band. You want to be able to, cruise your band through, whatever music that you're playing. And, reading along on this, when he came through, he was taught the basics of drumming, but from that, he went forward and really started taking off in his own style, which is again, the Will Kennedy style. I want to say it's his style. I've never heard any other style or any other way that he anyone else play that way except for him. He's the only one that I've heard, and being able to watch it even though it was on YouTube, and just watching him play, the emotion that he puts into it. If you're not putting emotion into the instrument that you're playing, you shouldn't even be playing the instrument at all. When it comes to playing music, you want to get that emotion out there. It's such a personal thing that you're trying to express that out for your audience to hear. And with him playing, it is just listening to him play. You feel the emotion that he wants you to experience with him, and it's just very pleasing to the ear. So the little drum part that you heard right there was off of the album Blue Hats, and that's off of the track Cape Town. That's the opening track to that CD. And again, getting back to the way he plays, if you can just hear it right away in that little section of recording there from the beginning of that track. You can just hear the intricacies of what he's playing there on the snare drum when it comes to between the hi-hat and the snare drum, the ghost notes in between. It's almost like a shuffle type groove in there, and it's fitting very perfectly in a jazz setting. So let's take another listen to that one more time. So as you can see there, it's really, if you try to break it down, and it'll take another entire episode to do that, to try to break down that part, because when I covered it on YouTube for my channel on there, I had already known the song for a while. I had practiced it for a while, and believe it didn't come overnight to try to get that groove down, because it is such a tough groove. It's really one of those grooves that if you're going to play it, you need to put some thought into it, and you really need to think about what's going on. You have to try to convey that same feeling that he's conveying through that on that track there. And again, that's one of those songs that it does what it does is it sets the tone for that entire album. It's a fantastic album. Nonetheless, the drumming is just phenomenal. If you get a chance to take a listen to it, I would highly recommend that. But getting back to the Will Kennedy being such an innovator on drums, it's like those grooves. Those grooves are just stuff that you've never heard anybody play them before until now, or until you actually sit down and you listen to that. I want to see if I can break down another groove in there that he uses. It's almost a sort of a similar context of the same style that he's playing with Cape Town, almost that shuffle groove. And we'll give it a listen to it and see how similar they are. So as you heard in that little snippet there, if you really dig deep into it, and I apologize, I'm just getting these right off of my CD tracks. I don't have them, where I can mute the sax, the EWI on there, the electric woodwind instrument. But if you listen to it closely, it is very similar to the Cape Town drums on there. The same groove. It's played a little bit differently, but the same shuffle goes in there and it sets that mood. That shuffle groove that he's using there, I find it handy. I've found it that after listening to his style for all those years and then really digging deep into what he's doing, some of the music that I've played when I've played with other artists around in the area, I've used that groove, just to try to. I would use it in a slower sense in a blues setting, and it would work. But when you really want to play it at full force, that groove does come in handy. And again, those are two of my favorite grooves that he plays, and it gets down, his little ride patterns that he plays later on in the track. Again, little signature things that he does that are just incredible, and they're pleasing to the ear, and I just love hearing him play that. Let's take a listen to both of them, and then we'll try to figure out what's going on in there. So, Cape Town. And again with the Red Sea drum part. So again, two very excellent shuffle groove drum parts for jazz and contemporary jazz, in my opinion. And they both flow well with the music there. And Will takes it to such a special level. It's one of those grooves that it just sticks with you, and you just the way that he's playing with the open hand, you can just hear the sublities in the snare drum, and just how he's just going back and forth between hi-hat and snare drum, and the beats that he's not playing, the heavy downbeats that he's not playing, really weigh in on setting the tone for such a great drum part. Again, he's just has this ability to take the drumming, to take the instrument to the next level, and it is just from a fan's point of view, from a drummer's point of view, it is very pleasing. You don't hear that so much now. A lot of the times, players nowadays, they're all about speed and flash, and that's never been one of the things that I've been about. Although, yes, it's very fun to watch that speed and flash, but I like to take a different approach to it. I take the Steve Smith approach. Steve is more technique, and there's more nuances in there. And a lot of the guys who play fast, it just looks like you're watching a car race, and it's just everybody's just racing to see who can play the fastest chaps and the fastest chops in like such a small, short amount of period of time. Sometimes it doesn't sound. To me, it just doesn't sound. It doesn't sound pleasing to my ears. But that's just me. And other players out there, other listeners out there, you guys might feel completely different. There again, a lot of the time when I'm listening, it's like those are fun things to hear. You'll hear a lot of those drummers just like flying about 1 million notes a second, and then you come back and you sit back and you put on like a Yellow Jacket CD, or you put on something nice, and you start listening to drummers like Will Kennedy in contemporary jazz or whatever jazz or small group jazz settings, and they're doing stuff like this, and it just really takes you to a completely different level, another appreciation for the instrument that we play, and how musical the instrument is. And that's my whole thing about Will Kennedy being such an innovator, such a fantastic player, and one of my favorite drummers to listen to, just for listening purposes and for learning purposes. And you try to break down what it is he was doing and how innovative it is. And that's one of the things that the other